Scuderia Ferrari has sought its usual compromise. In Formula One, when resources are limited, there's not much else that can be done. This kind of trade-off, depending on the car's characteristics combined with those of the track, can perform better or worse. This is somewhat the current situation for the Italian side until significant aerodynamic updates arrive. In short, there is suffering while waiting for the changes to the SF-24 that are already in production to be introduced on track. The timing is known: September, when the Maranello team will fit several new components on the Italian car in the hope of finding those 3 or 4 tenths missing to once again challenge McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull for race victories. In the meantime, optimization is required, a term that always plays a primary role in Formula One. Right now, Red Bull, McLaren, and Mercedes are performing better. These 3 technical projects have far fewer uncertainties for their respective engineers. The prancing horse has acknowledged that the issues it is facing have been understood. However, there is no mathematical certainty that these problems will be resolved, which complicates the current campaign even further. The sad truth is that the 2024 Formula One Championship could have still been a golden opportunity for the Italian side to become a contender for the titles. Regarding the Dutch Grand Prix, unfortunately, the 4.259-kilometer circuit Zandvoort has never been favorable to Ferrari. Thinking it could be different at this moment was quite ambitious. On the first day of free practice for the Dutch Grand Prix, many things went wrong. Notably, Carlos Sainz's withdrawal during FP2 due to a transmission problem with car number 55 halted his work schedule. The Maranello team had already decided to focus entirely on qualifying. Hence, Charles Leclerc, the only survivor during the 30 minutes of the second free practice, concentrated efforts on data collection. The setup developed in the simulator for the car is not optimal, but not much more could be done with limited resources. The decision to move the center of pressure forward arises from the need to unload the rear to reduce drag. Ferrari believes that this configuration will prevent being overtaken during the race. Therefore, the focus is on the performance in the qualifying session to start in a good position and maintain it throughout the race. However, it remains to be seen what will happen, as the weather conditions for the 15th round of 2024 Formula One campaign are far from favorable. Now let's take a detailed look at how things unfolded for Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in FP3. It has been raining and continues to rain at Zandvoort. This means that whoever can maximize performance on a wet track will gain significant advantages. In Ferrari's garage, everything is ready, waiting only for the green flag for this last session before qualifying. Carlos Sainz goes out first with a set of full wet tires. His Ferrari race engineer Riccardo Adami asks him to use the same brake settings as in the second free practice session, while the car remains set to position GX3. A few laps before returning to the pit lane, where he performs a practice start in second gear. Immediately after, Carlos Sainz goes for another very slow lap to test the car and see if the problems have been resolved. It seems so, as everything is working as it should. A few minutes later, both Ferrari cars return to the track. This time, they are using green band Pirelli intermediate tires. However, even before completing half a lap, a red flag is shown due to Logan Sargent's crash at turn 4. All cars return to the garage while the marshals fix the track to resume action. The repair of the barriers is quite lengthy, as the damage from the American driver's crash is significant. This means that the free practice session is running out of time, just as conditions had improved, with no rain and the sun peeking through at Zandvoort. This is bad news for Ferrari, as Carlos Sainz has not yet been able to fully evaluate the car. FP3 resumes with 3 minutes left in the session, and all cars go out to make the most of every available second. The traffic is so heavy that confusion reigns supreme. The 2 Ferrari cars are on intermediate tires trying to complete a timed lap. The goal here is not so much to set a good time, but to understand how the car behaves on a wet track. In his attempt, Charles Leclerc is even forced to battle with 2 cars, while Carlos Sainz faces less traffic. After this collective madness, they move on to practice starts on the grid. The Monegasque provides some data. He mentions the front wing, which was not properly set up to balance the load with the rear of the SF-24 during his push lap. Finally, Ferrari heads into qualifying somewhat blind, as it was unable to validate the setup changes developed overnight in the simulator. We will have to wait and see how the car performs in the upcoming qualifying session, which, surprisingly, is expected to take place without rain, with the track gradually drying out. With little data available in FP2, let's look back at the telemetry data from the second free practice session. Max Verstappen's Red Bull and Charles Leclerc's Ferrari shows a gap of 0.457 seconds. During FP2, the Ferrari exhibited underwhelming performance, with the car being nervous in the second sector, where it loses about 0.3 seconds. Brian Bozzi continuously reported via radio that the main loss occurred in corners 8 and 9 due to understeer, with a gap of up to 0.3 seconds in these corners. To address this issue, Charles returned to the pits to add 2 clicks of front wing angle, aiming to improve the setup and resolve the mid-corner understeer that turned into oversteer on exit. Indeed, from corner 7 to corner 10, Red Bull has the upper hand, with Max Verstappen's car excelling in high-speed corners, achieving 5 km/h more mid-corner. Ferrari's difficulty is particularly evident in throttle usage. Leclerc lacks the confidence to take corners 7 and 8 at full throttle, unlike Verstappen, who is much more decisive and aggressive in direction changes. The Monegasque is always behind on the throttle and forced to lift off earlier than expected, even braking into corner 7 to aim the front end and reduce understeer. However, Ferrari appears to be quite competitive in traction out of corners 3, 10, and 12, which are slow corners where accelerating as early as possible is crucial. In these sections, the Ferrari consistently gains something in acceleration. Max Verstappen experienced slight oversteer exiting corner 3. He had to lift off slightly while attacking the curb, costing him about 0.150 seconds, a loss that is reflected up to corner 6, as clearly shown by the telemetry data. Mercedes has proven to be very strong with both drivers, particularly George Russell, in both qualifying and race simulations. In recent races, we have seen a significant improvement in the performance of the silver arrows, which on this track are enhanced by relatively low temperatures and the front-limited nature of the circuit. Mercedes usually struggles with hot conditions and rear-limited tracks, but the current conditions are favorable. George Russell especially excels in medium-fast corners. In the second sector, he gains 0.2 seconds on Lando Norris and reaches higher G-forces, indicating greater grip generation from the car. Russell manages to apply the throttle less in the middle of the corners, indicating a well-balanced car, and accelerates before Lando in almost every corner, gaining significantly in traction, as highlighted in the acceleration corners. McLaren's British driver, on the other hand, excels in medium-slow corners 1, 3, 10, 11, 12, consistently gaining in braking as he tends to brake later and carry more speed into corners, 4 km/h more in corner 1, 10 km/h more in corner 3. This is also evident from the longitudinal G-force graph, which shows the MCL38 performs well in braking. Another noteworthy point is that Mercedes seems to have a stronger engine, consistently gaining in all straights and reaching higher top speeds, the highest on the grid. However, this is something we will need to verify tomorrow, when all teams will increase engine revs and the competition will naturally become much tougher.